If you're hiring for your private practice or ever will hire in the future, then this video has information, much of it very little known information, that will be absolutely vital to make sure that you attract top talent applicants, even at a time like right now in 2022, when it's really hard to get applicants at all in a lot of markets. Two, to make sure that you interview in a way that will weed out those who are charming and have polished resumes, but would ultimately become bad hires. And then finally, the compensation packages and options that are most successful for cash-based healthcare practices to, one, make your top choice really happy to move forward and take the job, but with minimal risk, financial risk to your practice. Now, like I said, at the time of this recording, in a lot of markets, it can take many, many months to find a really great clinician. Administrators can still take some time to find the right one, but generally it's a lot faster because there's just a lot broader of an applicant pool. So in this video, I'm going to focus on finding the right clinician for your practice. But before we dive in, if you've been to these episodes before, you know I have a free resource for you to help you get results even faster. And in this episode, the resource is the Ultimate Cash Practice Recruiting and Interviewing Template Bundle. And what that is and what it includes are the job posts that I use and have used to attract top quality clinicians for my cash practice. As well, you're going to get my administrator job post as well. Then there is a set of sample interview questions to, again, weed out those potential bad hires. And finally, the Motivator Index. And this thing is an absolutely key tool to use in your interview process. They fill it out and it tells you, outside of just pay, what motivates them and what hierarchy of things motivate them at different levels, so that you can help create the compensation package that's going to be most attractive to them and get them to say yes, but also give you the right negotiating tools and bargaining chips, if you will. And finally, to know how to manage them over time to get the most out of that employee while keeping them happy to be working with you. So this is a huge resource. I always get so excited about these free resources because they really, really are clutch. They're going to help you to implement things and just get things done for you and get results faster. You can download this one at drjarodcarter.com/episode 6, or just click the link below this video. Again, that's drjarodcarter.com/episode 6. Okay, let's dive in. We're going to start with recruiting. And before I get into the little nitty-gritty tactics with recruiting and job posts, I want to first say that the time to start developing relationships with potential hires and building relationships and networking and just knowing the great clinicians in your area is always now. Even if you're not planning on hiring for months or years to come, when you get to that point, if you have that list of at least 3, 4, 5 people that you know would be, likely be great fits or know would be great fits, and you can reach out to them, you will be so, so glad that you took this approach. I've had so many students that get to the point of needing to hire and they need to hire fast, and then they can't find the right fit. And if they had just done the work ahead of time to constantly be meeting people and networking, they wouldn't have ended up in that situation. So please if you take nothing else from this video, take my advice on that. You will be glad that you did. Now, let's talk about job posts. I'm not going to get into a great deal of details there because you get them for free as templates in the free resource at drjarodcarter.com/episode 6. But let's just say you want to make sure you think of it in just like you would think about marketing to a patient. You have to identify your prospective applicants' pain points and address those in the post as well. In other words, you need to speak to the things that you know that your colleagues and your potential hires are dealing with that they don't like in their current employment. Most of the time they're employed and they're looking for something else. So is it they're being buried in paperwork? They're being asked to see more and more patients over time, et cetera, et cetera. All those things that you address in your practice with your cash practice approach, low volume, whatever the case may be, all the features that address their pain points. That's what the job post is about. Not just what you're looking for. Obviously, you include that as well, but make sure you're really selling to that prospective applicant to get them to click and apply. Okay, let's talk about where to post your job. A lot of people just think, okay, Indeed, maybe LinkedIn, and that's about it. But there's a lot of different places, and especially when it's hard to find good applicants, but even when it's not, like you want to cast the widest net possible to get in front of as many eyeballs, have the highest chance that that one or two people that would be the perfect fit do see it. So of course there is Indeed, there is LinkedIn, and you can of course put money behind those posts to pay to get in front of more eyeballs if you want. But there's also, not just your Facebook business page, if you hadn't thought of that, but, take that Facebook business page job post and put some money behind it, targeting your geography and the job title of your, of the clinician that you're looking for. And then personal Facebook. I mean, don't be afraid to go on there and say, hey, we're growing, we're doing great, and we're looking for a superstar clinician in this area. If you know of anybody who might be interested, please tag or share this post with them. Ask them to tag or share the post. That's really, really important. If you don't ask, you'll get less of that. And that's the point. You're trying to get in front of your friends who aren't clinicians who might know somebody who'd be interested. And then Facebook groups. There's usually going to be some sort of employment style job posting Facebook groups in your area. See if there's any related specifically to your type of practice or to your field, or at least to healthcare in general. There's no reason not to post it there. I don't think you ever have to pay to post your job there. Lesser used sites, Monster is still around at the time of this recording. There's a few others out there. I mean, even Craigslist. In the past, I've gotten really good employees from Craigslist. I don't know if these days you'd want to post it there, but again, if you're really struggling to find someone, you want to get it out in front of as many places and many eyeballs as you can. And then don't forget about local college or programs, clinical programs, for where they'd have job posting boards for alumni and recent grads. And then your state and national professional associations, they usually have some sort of job posting job boards. A lot of times they're paid. You might have to pay, but sometimes they're free, just depending. So before we get into direct recruiting and direct networking, I do want to mention one thing. And that's to open your mind to the idea of using a level of clinician or a level of licensure that maybe you weren't considering before. And an example in my field in PT is to consider using a physical therapy assistant. And I know that in the cash practice world, and I was one of these people years ago, a lot of people have this idea where, they're not going to pay out of pocket, and not use their insurance to work with a PT assistant. And over the years, having many people in my audience and direct, coaching clients use PT assistants to incredible effect, I can tell you that my mind is completely changed on that. If you hire a great personality with a great skill set, it doesn't matter if they have an A behind the PT. It doesn't matter if they're an OT assistant. It doesn't matter if they're a physician's assistant. I'm telling you. Open your mind to the idea of it. And I can tell you also from direct experience, some of my platinum coaching clients use PT assistants for the vast majority, probably 90% of the care they give. And they are kicking most of their practices' butts when it comes to the out-of-network PT practice model. I mean, they are doing a lot of revenue, and the vast majority is performed by PT assistants with great skill sets and great personalities. So keep your mind open to the idea that, hey, if I just can't find, a DPT, what about a great PTA? And consider that. And at the time of this recording, they just had that huge 15% cut to PTA reimbursements, right? So there's actually a lot of unemployed PTAs right now, but not many unemployed PTs. So there's a whole lot broader of a field, or of a population that you can draw from if you're willing to look in that direction. So just food for thought and something to think about. Okay. So direct networking and recruiting. This is all about getting out there and meeting people. I already mentioned, doing that before, but where, right? So obviously first choice, professional association. If you have, state professional association and your region meets up, even online, but if they're meeting in person, be there, meet those people. There might be other local like meetup.coms that have healthcare professionals that get together, and there might be some people in your field that regularly attend those, and that would also be something to look into. Ask your colleagues, put the word out, whether directly, calling or texting them or emailing them, Facebook message, whatever. But ask your colleagues, do you know anyone? I'm looking, I need a really skilled clinician. And I'm struggling there's just not a whole lot of people applying. And then even if you have competitors that are on a good, like you're on a good friendly basis with them, ask them as well, because you never know. I mean, I personally, I've had people who submitted resumes that wasn't hiring. And I was like, hey, this isn't, and they've reached out because they want a cash practice where they're one-on-one with their patients, full hour sessions. And I've passed them on to my competitor cash-based practices just down the road because we're friends. And so you never know. So I would reach out to them as well. And then finally, and I'm not saying to go this route, but if you're really, really struggling to find somebody, you can use an approach that is used every day in most industries out there, and that's direct recruiting from competitor businesses. So one way to do that would be to go on Google reviews of the other clinics around you in your city and see what staff clinicians are being named in those Google reviews and being raved about, in a few of them. And then you can use LinkedIn or Facebook or other methods to reach out directly to them, not through obviously their clinical or their business email address, but you can directly reach out in that way. And so direct recruiting has its place in a big way. And sometimes that's where you're going to find your person rather than all the job posts and just waiting for people to come to you. Now, a bonus pro tip on the recruiting and part of the interviewing process, when you put your job post out there, where you're sending people to apply, on Indeed and these others, they have like the apply button. But what I use is a process that automatically weeds out candidates who can't follow directions, who don't pay enough attention to detail to follow directions. And so I use Gmail filters and Google Forms in order to automatically have them follow a process where if they do it right, they get sent to a written interview automatically. And then I'm notified when they fill out this written interview. And I don't have to look at a polished resume or 50 resumes before I see, anything about this person. I can go in and say, okay, 1, they followed my directions. 2, okay, now I'm looking at this written interview. They actually know how to write. I like their responses. Now I'm ready to look at their resume and get them on the phone. On the, and the opposite of that is what most providers do, or practice owners do, or HR professionals, is they get flooded with resumes and cover letters who are all totally polished, really nice. Of course, they're going to, not have any mistakes in them. And then they go straight into like phone interviews or even in-person interviews. And there's just a lot of things where you could have weeded out a ton of applicants who just don't follow directions and can't really write without, their brother or their parents or whoever, going through their resume with a fine-tooth comb. You can get the exact instructions on how to do that with Gmail filters and all that kind of stuff I just mentioned at automatedhiring.com. I put a very quick to implement course together walking you through those steps. So check that out at automatedhiring.com. Okay, let's get into the interview. So even if you're using that process, it's not totally automated. You're sending a link to a Google form. I really like the idea of, if they've sent you their resume, have them do a written interview first. If you like what you see, have them do that first. Again, it's going to reveal a lot of potential issues that you wouldn't find in the resume. So I would definitely get that set up. And in the in the free resource for this episode, we will have those questions that I ask in the written interview as well. So you can just take any of those that you want and just immediately implement it. Now, you're going to get also a variety of the sample interview questions in that free resource. Again, that's drjarodcarter.com/episode 6. You're going to get a lot of sample interview questions in there. In this video, I want to talk about a concept that's really, really valuable for really getting down to the true characteristics of these candidates. And the process that I want you to go through is, number 1, you create a list of the characteristics needed to be successful in the position you're trying to fill. That can be any variety of things, depending on what, maybe it's a self-starter, who figures out problems before they come up. Maybe it's someone who you can just tell the results you want to get and they will learn a skill set to get there. Maybe it's someone who's super punctual. Maybe it's someone who's got an especially compassionate demeanor. Maybe it's someone who's all about like sales and marketing and they're a clinician, one of those rare clinicians who's okay with that. You're going to create that list of characteristics. Don't try to find a unicorn, okay? But create the top characteristics that you need for someone to really be successful in that position. And then you're going to the second step is reverse engineering your questions or your statements in the interview to reveal if the candidate has demonstrated those characteristics in the past. We're not asking what would you do in this situation? It's what have you done, right? Because people generally don't change drastically, but they will, if they're trying to get a job, they'll say what they think you want them to say, right? They'll say what they think you want to hear, right? And so when you make it more about past scenarios and what have you done in this or that situation, if they're telling you the truth, that's going to be a lot more revealing than saying like, if this was a scenario, what would you do? Because it's a little more easy to kind of fudge and, oh yeah, I think I would do that, So some examples of that, right, would be the kind of like, tell me about a time in which XYZ, fill in the blank. So like, let's say you wanted that self-starter who really figures things out. You can tell me about a time in which you were asked to complete a project or task that required knowledge or a skill set that you didn't at that time have. What did you do? Right? Maybe you want someone who predicts issues, right? Or finds solutions to problems without being asked to. You ask about that. Tell me about a time when you saw an issue in a practice you had worked at before and you worked out a solution and brought it to the practice owner, to management, right? Maybe you want someone who is naturally wants to follow up with their patients and stay with them even after discharge and make sure that they're still good and get them back on schedule if needed. Then maybe you just say, have you ever followed up with a discharged patient for any reason? Have you done that without being asked to? Why did you reach out? If they have, it's like, well, if you did that regularly, did you commonly have people that rescheduled and like kind of came back in for a tune-up or just got back on your schedule? Get a sense of if that's something that just comes natural to them, right? Maybe you want someone that's going to help grow and support like a wellness or a maintenance program, performance programs, right? Asking, have they ever been a part of that before? Or actually maybe not asking if they've been a part of that before, maybe first like going a step further back and seeing like, is this applicant someone who's of the mindset that would fit well with that? And what I mean by that is that I know in the PT world, a lot of clinicians are all about get them fixed, get them to the end of their goals, plan of care, and then off my schedule, right? If I'm seeing patients for the long term, that's like a slide on me and my skills. Whereas, plenty of us now see it as more of like, we want to help people move and feel a certain way for life. And we know that, the stresses of life and physical, activity build up and that it can use good maintenance work and mobility and maybe manual therapy, whatever the case may be. So asking the question, what are your thoughts on physical therapy patients continuing with services after the completion of their initial plan of care? And just leave it at that. Don't indicate, I've got this program I'm looking to build or looking to do more with. Just ask what are their thoughts on that, because they'll tell you right there if they're going to be the type of person that's going to help you to move something like that forward or really have the mindset that's going to hold it back in a big way. So again, I mentioned the motivator index, and I want to make sure that before you get too far into the interview process, you have them fill that out. Like if they're coming in for an in-person interview, nice introduction, how you doing? Before we get started, we have all of our applicants fill out this motivator index, kind of tells us, what drives you, what motivates you. You'll rate all these things and from 1 to 16, I think it is. And having that again is going to really help to guide your compensation, your negotiations, and then again, their ongoing management of that employee to get the most out of them and keep them happy over time because you know what drives them. All right, now let's talk about compensation. And in the past, the full salary or, just a straight up hourly pay for part-timers, but they're getting paid whether they're seeing a patient or not. That was kind of some of the only options that were used a long time ago. Now it's become much more flexible in what people will be willing to do. And in a good way for practices, you can really lower your financial risk with these different options. So I want to outline 4 very common options that I see throughout private practice in general, but especially in small cash-based practices as well. So first, you do have your base salary, just your salary, just salary, or if they're a set part-time, they're getting paid hourly for every hour and they have a set schedule, and that's that. Next, we have a base salary, then with additional compensation, sometimes on a pay per patient basis, once they have seen a certain number of patients in that week or in that pay period, right? So you have a nice low base salary to give them some solidity to their take home pay. And then if you're busy, if you can keep them busy and they're hustling to maybe bring in their own patients, then they can make more and more and more depending on how many they see. And sometimes practice owners will tier those. So say the first 5 patients beyond, your break even point, that they can start earning an extra, say $10 a patient, then the next, 5 patients after that, they earn an extra $20 a patient. Then the next 5 after that, they earn another $30 a patient. And what it does is if they're on the cusp, right? And they're like, oh, I could, try to get that patient back on schedule, or maybe if I stay late and see that one, well, now I'm going to get $30 extra for that plus my, base. Like, that will motivate them when you have that tiered system. It's a little harder to track, obviously, and keep track of with payroll, but it can work to be motivational in that way. But remember, going back to the motivator index, sometimes, and I've kind of been surprised by this in the past, where I've had plenty of clinicians over time that just didn't seem that motivated by money. Surprisingly, to me, it's quite a motivating thing, but to them, not so much in all cases. So if you're, again, use that motivator index as information on what should I present to them as an option that they're likely going to be, happiest to go forward with and motivated by long term. So then there's pay per patient, along with like a lower admin or hourly rate for when they're not seeing patients. A lot of times you'll have you'll want to do a pay per patient. Hey, if you're not seeing a patient and making the practice money, I don't want to be paying you to sit there and twiddle your thumbs or just work on administrative stuff. But a lot of clinicians are not down with that, especially if the schedule yo-yos a bit and they might not be so happy, and they want to get paid if they have a 2 or 3 hour gap. Like, they don't want to make nothing in that time. So sometimes saying, look, I'll pay you X amount when you're seeing patients. And then when you're not seeing patients, here's the list of things you'll be working on. And I'll give you, $15 or $20 an hour, whatever the case may be. That's a valid kind of admin rate for your area. Same thing with marketing activities. A lot of times, you would think that if they're getting paid per patient, going out and marketing to get more patients would be, motivation enough, but it's not always the case. Sometimes they don't want to be there on the weekend running event, or, marathon if they're not making something for that. So if you have someone like that, that's really a great clinician, this would be a third option, or an option that might work, is a little bit of something for those in between patient hours. And then finally, you've got your pay per patient only. If they're not seeing a patient, they're not getting paid. But if they're seeing a patient, they're getting paid, and they're getting paid very, very well. And so those 4 options basically go from, lowest pay to them, but most lowest risk to them, to higher risk to them, but higher reward. They have the most chance so they have the most chance to make the most money if they and you can keep their schedule really busy. And if they're willing to see a lot of patients, they can see, they can make a 6-figure income as a staff clinician, and obviously in the medical world, maybe, multi 6-figure. So, but that's how we kind of break it down in my practice. And I usually will offer kind of, the second 2, or maybe I'll say, look, I can do a base salary, but it's really going to be low. If you want just a straight salary, totally predictable, that's fine, but this is what I can offer. If you're willing to get paid on a per patient basis, but you really need something for those gaps, this is what I can offer. Maybe it's $60 an hour and $10 an hour for admin, 60 for patients, $10. But if you're willing to go, pay per patient only, I can give you $80 an hour for the patients, because my risk is lowered. And anytime I know you're seeing a patient, I'm paying you, I'm making at the time of this recording, $195 in revenue. Right? Overhead very quickly adds up, and it's not that I'm taking home $100 a patient, but I'm still making a decent profit at even a really high rate, paying my clinicians on a per patient basis. Okay. So then finally, if you think about benefits, it's another question that comes up. That is really to your discretion and what makes sense to you. You need to run the numbers. Often a really small practice will struggle financially to offer a huge benefit package. But that's something to work with a professional on. And a lot of times certified financial planners, accountants, they incorporate those types of services. They can help guide you on that. But just again, going back to the motivator index, sometimes those things will help guide you on saying, maybe for this person, I should offer a little bit more paid time off. If I can't meet them where they want on the salary side of things or the pay per patient, say, well, I can't do that, but I could add an extra few days of paid time off. So you can use different components of your compensation and benefits package as kind of bargaining and negotiation tools to kind of come up with something that's more of a win-win for both of you. So again, I highly recommend that you go to drjarodcarter.com/episode 6 and click the link to download that cash practice recruiting and interviewing template bundle. There's obviously a ton of done for you things in there that you can immediately implement to get faster results with all of this. And as always, I love your feedback. Please leave comments below. Any questions you have, leave below. And if you have any colleagues that might benefit from this information, please, share or tag them here. Give the like button a click. And then finally, this had a lot of steps. So this would be one of those videos I would suggest that you save. There's a way to save these videos. Keep this saved, because if you're not going to immediately implement it, it is something that you'll want to come back to when you are ready to start looking to expand your practice and hire that next employee. And finally, if you want more information on how to transition out of network, how to take your current cash practice to the next level, or start a successful cash practice, please enjoy these related videos, and I will see you in the next episode.